Just go for me to Ecclesiastes chapter 1, please. All right, so this book is written by Solomon. Solomon struggled with depression. You can read in the whole of the book of Ecclesiastes. Did you get your Bible, boys? Okay. You'll get it this morning. All right. And he used to write a lot of things that, from his perspective of depression. So listen to this. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. So, all right, so this is approximately, if I must guess, probably about 1300 years before Christ. So we know then that the king of David sat in Jerusalem. Do you understand what I'm saying here? All right. Now you might say, but how do we know the Bible this, the Bible that? Well, there's archaeology and documents to prove it outside of the Bible. Okay? So we understand it was the king of David, the son of David. David, the second king of? Who? King of? Israel. History didn't start in 1948. So let's just, get that. This is a narrative everyone wants to sweep under the carpet. But let's just go there for a second. The king of Israel. Okay? Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. Listen to that. It's flippant deep. Give that a thought. All the rivers and streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be. And what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be, will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. Can someone explain that to me, what he was thinking here? What does it mean to you? No one wants to give it a shot. So, on that note, no one wants to give it a shot. You will find, if you have any kind of intelligence, let's use that word, all right, that the people who know and the people who continue to grow are people who are continually asking questions about all kinds of different subjects and different things. Those are the people who then go and seek the answers to these questions. And many men, I know one of my professors in varsity currently, all right, has spent the last 10 years, that's a decade of study, just on the book of Romans. And I can understand why he's doing that, because he has not yet found the answers to questions that he's seeking the answers to. Why was this said? Why was those people there? Why did they choose to put that in the Bible? Why did Paul decide to write it that way? Why? You know, we have the same type of seeking in medical science. You know that 50 years ago, 60 years ago, doctors were telling pregnant women that smoking was good for them. Did you know that? Why did they say that? Because they had no evidence contrary. But then they started seeing an upswing in heart conditions, cancers, and they started asking questions. Where's this coming from? Why are people getting sick at such a rate? We never had these issues in the past. We always had cancers and heart diseases, but why all of a sudden now? And then they tracked the people that were getting these sicknesses, and they all come from the same demographic of young people that were young at this time. What did they do different to the generations before them? This new thing that's hit the market, the 7-inch God, cigarettes. And so they did studies and studies and studies and studies and studies, and over the last 50, 60, 70 years, they've come to the conclusion that, you know what, cigarettes cause heart disease, cigarettes cause cancers. They did, as technology improved, they test the gases that you inhale, they tested the chemicals that go into the production of cigarettes. They tested what is the difference between a tobacco plant and the tobacco when it's in the green fields and when you light it and inhale it. What is the difference between the two? And they came to a conclusions that they write what they call peer-reviewed articles in medical journals, where other doctors can read them, further that study and say, yes, we agree with that or we don't agree with that. And the consensus has been established now across the medical field. Cigarettes are very bad for you. Okay? And it's the same in life. You have to start questioning certain things in your life. And if you don't understand something, if I speak about something here and you don't understand it, there's no such thing as a stupid question. The other day, a guy asked a question here, and many of you laughed at him, but it wasn't a stupid question. It's a question that many people don't understand the difference to. The question was, what is the difference between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam? And so, giggled. Now, those that giggled, you need to explain it because you obviously know, in depth and intrinsically, what the difference is. But you see, the laughing comes from a state of ignorance. You yourself don't know. But rather than be exposed for what you don't know, you'll laugh at someone asking a proper question. Because let me tell you, from the time of Judaism, which is the oldest Middle Eastern religion, Abrahamic religion, Judaism and Christianity together have got the oldest written texts known to man. And then Islam is a relatively new religion, coming 680 years after the death of its prophet. Right? Okay? That now, 2,000 years later, or 1,400 years later, if you want, in the case of Islam, 6,000 years after the birth of Judaism, we're still arguing about it. What is right? What is wrong? Who is right? Who is wrong? Why we right? Why they wrong? Why they right? Why we wrong? So God puts his hand up and goes, I want to know the difference. And we laugh. When in reality, this is one of the deepest theological and intellectual debates going on in the world right now. People are dying right now, bombing each other over this debate, killing each other. People that have genetic, what's the word I'm looking for? Roots. All come from the same genetic roots, as far as back as we can track them with science. Come from the same genetic family, from the same region, are killing each other over my book or your book. That's the reality of it. The bottom line is that. Which God is God? So don't laugh when someone asks a question, because you could be exposing yourself as a fool. Rather say, yeah, you know what, I want to back him up. What are the differences? What are the realities? And it's the same with addiction, but I've got a couple of guys sitting here who have been in addiction and been in treatment multiple times. So you can only be in addiction once, theoretically. You're an addict or you're not an addict, theoretically speaking. But as an addict, you could have gone to treatment 1,000 times and still not achieved the goal of sobriety. You might have achieved spurts of sobriety in your life. In other words, you have a certain amount of clean time behind you. But invariably, you always gravitate back to the addiction. And this is what has made scientists believe that it must be a sickness. It must be a disease. Yet there are other people out there that they've been addicts for 2 decades, never been to treatment. Go for treatment once, never touch drugs again, ever. Why? How are they able to achieve the goal so quickly? I know a guy like that. He was with me in Noupoort in 98. Went to Noupoort for 4 months, went on his 10 days, came back, did another 4 months, left Noupoort. We're now 2025. He's never touched drugs again. We have a guy that runs one of the most well-known treatment centers in Johannesburg, Houghton House, Alex Hamlin. He recovered through that process. The disease philosophy, the Minnesota model. I saw yesterday, or not yesterday, I'm lying, last week, that he posted a badge, 32 years clean, uninterrupted sobriety. How did he achieve that? Why did he achieve that? And it's a simple thing. It's really a simple thing. It's a change of mindset, gentlemen. It's a change of mindset. Now, I'm going to once again enter into some of the things that I've done here over the last couple of weeks, and I'm going to hit them again here this morning. That's why I read Ecclesiastes. There's nothing new under the sun. Everything that has been done will be done again, and everything that will be done again has been done. Now, why is it your 4th, 5th, 9th time in rehab? I keep hearing it here. I've done this to death. I've done it over and over again. What are you going to teach me new? Who knows? Maybe a lot, maybe nothing. The outcome will determine that. The outcome. So, I can give you a personal example. I did 6 years in Noupoort. Couldn't sustain my recovery. I went down to a Harmony retreat in a great town. I did 3 months there. I'm still clean. I've had 1 interruption, 2018. But for all intents and purposes, I'm clean 16 years. Now, how could I achieve in 3 months what I couldn't achieve in 6.5 years? Because I didn't achieve it in 3 months. I've achieved it over the last 17 or 16 years. Here's the difference. What did they do different to what Noupoort did? I'll tell you what they did. Because I can earmark it. They put the power of the choice and the responsibility into my hands and took it out of God's hands. Do you understand what that means? It comes from the mindset of constantly blaming everything around you for your failures. And while you're still doing that, that's one of the reasons you may struggle to recover. The first port of call is that there. That's why it's up there. Whatever it takes. Now, what does that mean? I'll give you a simple example. You want to leave today, right? Your family wants you to stay 2 years. You have a track record. You have a track record, but whether you're 18 here today or 60, you have a track record of not being able to sustain a life. And those of you that have sustained a short period of life always seem to end up collapsing it. Right? Now the people around you are saying to you, listen here, we know you very well. We see how you operate. Got a guy here right now. We spoke to people that he knows on the weekend. The people said to us, yeah, we are aware this guy can do 6 months anywhere. But that's pretty much his limit. At the 6-month mark, he starts rattling. He starts scheming. He starts plotting. He starts breaking down. What we want to see, that's why I use the term 2 years. I'm not trying to encourage anybody here to do 2 years. I'm using an example from someone here's family. They say, we will only recognize any kind of change when we see 2 years sober. Well, we start saying, right, this guy is changing. Now, you can go across addiction treatment around the world. Most people, that is the benchmark. 2 to 3 years sobriety. Before people start taking a recovering addict seriously again. But then you get guys, I've said it here, and I'll repeat it. I've done 2 years clean just to keep a smile on my wife's face. And failed straight afterwards. Because now I realize I've got it in the bag. They trust me again, and then I manipulate that trust to do what I've been waiting to do for 2 years. True story. Now, I'm sure many of you will relate to that. And many of you will lie about it. But that is the reality of the addicted mind. The addicted mind can plot a relapse for years, but for years. Now, the only thing that can stop that is the mindset changing. If you're still sitting here thinking you're missing out on something in your addiction, you will relapse. The last hit you took, you didn't catch it right, you didn't flip and do whatever it was you wanted to do when you were high. Whatever it is, bro, you were intervented right at the wrong moment. Whatever that story is that you're telling yourself, just that one, I told myself that story many times. You know that first hit I ever took on a crack rock put? I was chasing that thing for nearly 20 years, 16 years. It's quite weird because I was 16 years on drugs, interrupted. I went to Noupoort a couple of times in that 16 years. But I'm 16 years clean. Right now I'm at that. My clean time is as long as my addiction. And I want to tell you, bro, it hasn't always been easy, but it's been worth it and better. My life is better, but not always easier. That I can guarantee you. Anyone who promises you smooth sailing in your clean life is a liar. Because in your clean life, you're going to meet with challenges that you usually would have run away from and gone and used to hide from and escape from. For many guys that go into like business after, many guys that leave rehab, go into business and do very well. Very well. I'm one of those guys. I went into aluminium and glass, right? Did well. Yes, my wife helped me. I've told you it's the story. But I did the work and I built that thing, right? And then I got to a point where the business got so big and so busy that the pressure gets more. And as is our nature as human beings, not just addicts, the more we make, the more we spend. The more we spend, the more debt we make. The more debt we make, the harder we have to work. The harder we work, the more pressure, but also the more money. The more money, and the circle continues. More spending, more debt, more pressure, more work, more spending, more debt, more pressure, more work, more spend. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually the pressure is one of the things that causes us to flee, along with other triggers. I was telling someone last week, we had a contract, we were a multi-million rand contract that we scored in Houghton. So if you go out of Hillbrow, as you go down to Parktown towards the highway to get onto the highway there, go past Kalani. Just before that on the left, there's a massive complex that was put up there. It's called Houghton Village. My company did all the aluminium and glass in that entire thing, bro. I was running 4 teams just on that site. The money was pouring in. Do you understand? Pouring. Exactly what the Bible says. The blessings were coming in. I was buying buckies and I was buying motorbikes and I was carrying on, bro. Life was good. Every Friday night I'd be at Jimmy's Killer Prawns in Boksburg and then News Cafe. And then a quick little trip to the nightclub also didn't hurt, and a 1-2 lines and a couple pulls here and there. But I had it, here's the words, remember the stories, under control. It wasn't a relapse. Why? Because in my mind, I hadn't picked up the pipe. You know what I mean? And then Saturday, I chill, because on Sunday I would go ride dirt bikes with my mates at the Wild, right? So I didn't want to go out Saturday nights because I didn't want to be fraught on Sunday, right? And I maintained like that for 2 years, but. And then I got that big contract. And money really started coming in properly. And while I was running that site, I had another site in Sandton for FMB, where we were putting in frameless showers. That's big contract. That's proper money. And we were doing, I think, 400, we were revamping 400 rooms in their college in Sandton. So to give you an idea, if I remember correctly, the supply and fit, we were charging like 28 grand per shower. Right? And we were getting it, all right, for about 6.5 grand, and the fitting is literally an hour and a half job if you do it right on a frameless. So an hour and a half's labor plus 6 grand or 8 grand for the actual equipment and hardware and glass. And then clapping them 20 grand profit, 18 grand profit per shower. And they were happy to pay it because we were the cheapest. So we were making Tom, bro, 70% down up front before you even start the job. Now you work that out, 30 grand times 300 times 70%. And then I would fluctuate between Houghton and go to my guys at that site and check and what was going on, right? But as is the story of corruption, Because I then became corrupt. So how did I become corrupt? I didn't become corrupt with money. I became corrupt because one day I was sitting at Houghton Village and I was bored out of my skull. I was tired of sitting in the dust, all right, and rain and sludge. And I could see, just over the hedge, I could see where I used to score. So the Safari Hotel. And then I conned myself into believing, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go check, knowing very well this place doesn't exist anymore. I'm just going to go check, because I can't really remember. You see the corrupted thinking, right? If Tropical is still there, because Tropical makes the best shawarmas in the country. But what I'll do is, on the way to Tropical, I'll just drive past Safari and Mimosa and check if I know anyone, if I recognize anyone. And I drove there and I didn't check anyone, but I checked some Naji standing there, and I tuned, hey, I can't remember the oak's name anymore. I said, I'm looking for so-and-so. And they said, hey, hold on, brother. I phoned him for you. He's here. I said, sweet, I want to say, how's it? And the oak came, hey, long time. I said, yeah, now I've been clean now 2 years. What did you change? Oh, cool, man. You need something. I said, no. He said, so then why are you here? I said, you know what, he's right. Give me, I can't remember how many I scored, but it wasn't a lot. It was a couple. And I never got up to where Tropical was supposedly to be, not to be. And I went back to the site, and I hit those 3, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go home now. I can't hit more. And I handled it. But I still didn't catch that rush from 20 years before, 15 years before. And then every now and then, I would go and score one or two. And then one day I went and scored, and I just couldn't stop. And that's what got me into Harmony. Right off my bakkie, destroyed 3 contracts, got ripped off by the guys that we were subcontracting for at FNB, ripped us off for almost R1 million. Everything just happened same time. The minute I picked up that drug, things started going bad. Almost immediately. Started picking up shit at work. Then what was happening is before I picked my guys up in the morning, my one team that ran with me, before I picked them up, I was picking them up in Kempton Park because they were coming from Tembisa. So they would catch taxi to Tembisa. I'd come from Benoni, I'd pick them up in Kempton, and then we'd go to site. But then I found by accident, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, a dealer in Kempton. So when I would go there half an hour before the taxi comes, I'd stop there, my dealer would come and give me rocks, and then I would sit and I would bat, then they would arrive. And then eventually I didn't even care. I was batting in the bakkie with my oaks in the bakkie with me. And then they pimped me to Isabel. Because I told them I was smoking American tobacco. And I think like after the 4th time, I nearly wrote them off. That's when they decided they didn't want me smoking that stuff. Yeah, my bro, that's what I told them. That's what I tell everybody that doesn't understand rocks, particularly black South Africans at that point. I told that to a security guard one day in Hillbrow. I went to go smoke in the basement under a building, and the security came to me, what are you doing? I said, I'm smoking American tobacco. He said, oh, what's that? I said, you want to try? He said, yeah. I'll never forget as long as I live, that poor oak, bro. And he got in the car, and I didn't want him to have any more, so I gave him a proper hit, bro. First time ever. And then I sat there in my car like this. It was an old fraught Volkswagen Beetle that I was driving around. It wasn't even my car, it was someone else's, my getaway vehicle. And he sat in that thing, and he hit that rock boot, and he just... Hish! Hish! I'm feeling too strong now! I'll never forget. And then I eventually had to stop smoking there because every time I stopped there, that oak was in my car. He wanted his hit put. This is a true story. So that's where that American tobacco thing comes up. So that's what I told my workers. But it destroyed my life again. And you know, what I figured out is that For me, this was for me. It might not be for you, but it's something that you need to establish and figure out for yourself. Is if you were doing so well and things were going so great, why did you go back? Why did you have to go to the safari and go score? Why did you have to stop the next time in Bertram's and score again? You know? Why did you flush it down the toilet? Why did you throw it away? And it's something I've pondered on for a long, long time. And I've come to the conclusion is because I wasn't where I needed to be. I wasn't in the right place. Because since I've been here, we've had major ups and downs in this place. Major, bro. Far bigger challenges and obstacles than I've ever had to meet in the business world I've had here. And it's never taken me to a place where I've thought, you know, I'm desperately unhappy, or I don't want to be doing this, or whatever it is, or the pressure's too great, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? I seem to be in my groove, and I think that has come to a place that I learned in Harmony, because in Harmony, it wasn't strict at all. There was a halfway house on the property, and the oaks at the halfway house, while I was there, we had 2 overdose deaths in that halfway house. After I left, I believe there were another 3 overdose deaths in that halfway house. And I was invited to join that center as a counselor, you know, because of the amount of time I'd spent in rehabs and my understanding of addiction in terms of biblical recovery and that. Gad, who's the owner there, Pastor Gad, said to me, why don't you stay on? My other pastor is leaving, that house is available. And I really thought about it because I thought, hey, that's going to be the perfect opportunity to not come back to Joburg. Do you know what I mean? And it's beautiful there. And if you're a dirt bike rider, you know, and they allowed me to take my dirt bike down there, and I still had 1 bakkie left. I had a little 1400 like that. I drove my bakkie with my bike on it all the way from Joburg to there. After I tried to abscond. I didn't try to, I did abscond. And then on my way home, I had an epiphany because my wife was sitting next to me. You know, I forced her to take me out. And I was driving back. And this is actual gospel truth, bro. You know, a miracle happened, bro. I looked at my wife. And it was the feeling that I had was that I was able to actually feel exactly what she was going through right there. It's like her entire emotional quotient transferred itself into my spirit for 30 seconds maybe, not even that long. And I couldn't carry that burden for that period of time. And I'd been expecting her to carry that burden for the last 6 years that she had been with me. Because that was 2008, and she'd been with me since 2002. So I couldn't carry the burden for 30 seconds, but I was expecting her to carry the burden for the last 6 years. And something changed in me right there, on the road to Colenso from Greytown. And I stopped the car. It was a company car. It was a little Passat 1.8 turbo. And for the first time in my life, I honestly said to her, meaning it, because of that experience. I didn't tell her that I had that experience. I was so overwhelmed. And I said to her, what do you need me to do? And for the first time in my life, actually meaning it. Because of that miracle. It was a miracle, bro. Because it's unexplainable by anything. And she said, I need you to go back so I can get better. And then, of course, the addict stepped in. And the next questions out of my mouth was, for how long? And she said, until you're ready. That's an open-ended time. It's an open-ended time, bro. And I'd also now just established a business, done everything right, made lots of money. But now, of course, the money was gone. The banks were knocking on the door already. Because the banks don't waste time, but clients that I dropped in the shit that I'd taken deposits from wanted to know why the work wasn't being done. My wife was dealing with all that shit while still running her own job. I said, but how are you going to handle it all? She tunes, I'll handle it. You just go and do what you need to do. I need you to go back. The work stuff is Mickey Mouse compared to dealing with your shit. Mickey Mouse. The shit I couldn't deal with is Mickey Mouse compared to dealing with me. I said, all right, I'll go back. I gripped her phone. I didn't have a phone. Oh, no, I did have a phone. I had a Tamagotchi. I phoned Gad. I said, listen, yeah, I'm about 60 k's out. Is my bed still there? Can I come back? He said, yes. I said, all right. I just want to do this. He said, what's that? I said, I just want to go and fetch my bakkie and my off-road bike. Will you let me do that? He said, when will you be back? I said, tomorrow. He said, cool. I drove all the way back. I loaded my shit. I caught a couple hours of sleep, and I drove back to rehab on my own. And then shortly after that, I had another experience in the forest, which you oaks all know about. I'm not going to go back into that. But it changed my life, but. And what really changed my life then is something that I need you guys to start understanding about your addiction. Stop masking your selfishness with a facade of concern for those around you. You're using all these excuses to get back out there when the reality is you actually don't give a damn about any of that. You're worried about your own self. If you were truly concerned about what other people need, you would listen to what they're saying about what they need. And you would adjust your life accordingly. Regardless of, and I'm going to say this, the possible negative impacts it might have upon yourself in terms of your reputation, your business dealings, whatever they may be. That is what those people need. That is what you do. And I did that for a long time. After 3 months there, you know, I was supposed to go with my newborn granddaughter, my stepdaughter, her husband, and my wife to Ballito for 2 weeks over Christmas. And I was booked into rehab in, I think about this time, about the 25th, 26th of October. Right? And then I was there 2 weeks, and then I did this absconding thing, and then I went back, right? So call it middle of November, right? And I said to my wife, who was very determined to become my not wife at that point, okay? And one day I'll tell you the story about why that is, but it involved my choices, okay? I said, are you going to let me come with on holiday? And I think she still laughs about that. She said, no. I said, why not? You know, still that part of me that it's about me, you know? And she said, because we actually want to have a holiday. And I said, all right. I put down the phone. I wasn't angry. I was sad, but I wasn't angry. And I went to this shitty little dorm that I was staying in, which was like a hut on the farm. And I went down and I thought about that. And I said, all right, you know, cool. I get it. I get it, bro. You know, I'm starting to really understand the level of destruction are causing people's mindsets and emotions with my behaviors. Because we don't ever understand it, because we're on the other side of that. And then they came, they picked me up on their way to Ballito. I spent the night with them at a game lodge there in Greytown. One night I bribed with them, what. They dropped me off the next morning and they hooked it to Ballito. And on the way back, they dropped me off some groceries and they rode back to Joburg. And I did my program, bro. And during the course of that program, I was offered that job. I spoke to my wife about it. I thought about it. But then I saw these ugs dying and what was going on there, and I didn't agree with the system there, to a great degree. Although I've imported a lot of what I learned there to here, is to take responsibility for your own addiction and make the choices you need to make in order to recover. Because unless you take responsibility for your own addiction and start making the correct choices, people cannot recover you. People cannot police you forever. But yes, we put in place control of money, control of people that you can hang out with, control of these things in the beginning stages of your addiction recovery to help you get used to the idea of making correct choices. But ultimately, you have to take the responsibility for yourself. And I'm sorry to say it, but going back to drugs is a failure. As much as people want to make you feel good about it's a disease and it's a relapse and all of that, the reality is it's a failure. You failed. And I don't think failure is always a bad thing. Last night I watched a mate of mine. Who watched the boxing last night? Anyone watch it? You're not supposed to have been watching it. We'll get into that later, because trust is something that's very hard to establish in life, my friend. When people give you trust, abusing it is the worst thing you can do, coming from a background of abusing trust. Every one of you I'm talking to. And people who abuse trust should not be rewarded for it. Simple. But it's a failure. You're going back. And why it's a failure is because the people that are invested in your recovery are not just yourselves. There's a lot of people that are playing a role in your walk. And have been, some of you, for many, 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 many years. For those of us that have been married long term, our wives. For those of us that have been staying at home, our parents, our siblings. For those of us that have managed to establish business relationships, the people that we've promised things in business. For those of us that we work for, when you work for a company, that company is paying you a certain amount of money because they expect for the money that they can trust you to do the job. It's based in trust. And when you go back to those things that you promised them you're not going back to ever again, you break that trust. And therefore, you have to take the responsibility upon yourself to not break the trust and realize that by doing what you keep doing is you're breaking trust, and that's what is a failure. Last night I watched a guy. I said to you, failure is not always a bad thing, because you can learn a lot in failure. In fact, you learn more in failure and in pain than you do in success, bro. Because if the failure and the pain is hard enough, you'll do everything in your power not to go back to that. And develop new mechanisms to overcome going back to that again. So last night, Keaton won that fight, period. But the judges didn't see it that way. Now, when you train at that level, and you fight and show the heart at the level that I fought, he was fighting a guy 25 kilos heavier than himself. A 6'7" giant, but. And in my view, he beat him. In my view. Not because Keaton's my friend. If he lost, I would have said he lost. He threw more punches. He landed more punches. He rocked the oak like 3 times, nearly knockout. But they said, sorry, Brute, tonight's not your night. We're giving the fight to that oak. That oak maybe threw a third of the amount of punches that Keaton threw. And so he failed. And after the fight, they said to him, and now, what do you say to that? He says, well, I'm 100% of the opinion I won. He says, the judges didn't see it that way. That's the way boxing goes. He says, my trainer's already told me where I made mistakes, and I'll go now back to the gym, and I'll correct those mistakes, and I'll be back. I'll be back. You know what I mean? And that's what failure teaches you. Or you can give up. You can give up, bro. But just because Keaton has fought at 100 fights before, or 50, whatever his record is, how many is it? 30 and 2 or something now, 30 and 3, or whatever it is. 15 and 3, whatever it is, all right? He's had 15 victories and 3 losses, let's say, right? Okay? But just because he's had 15 victories doesn't mean he thinks he knows it all. What? And that his coach can't teach him anything new. So the gym would be like his rehab. He's going back to rehab now to learn why he relapsed there. Even though he did 6 strong rounds, he still lost. Now he's got to go and figure out why he lost. And he's got to reconstruct the fight and check where he made mistakes so that in the next fight, he doesn't make those same mistakes. Now in the next fight, he might make different mistakes that he hasn't seen before and lose the game. Then he must go back to the gym, back to the rehab. And he must correct those. And then as he proceeds, he corrects it. But then you get oaks that are undefeated. They're out there. Floyd Mayweather Jr., undefeated. But he is. You get oaks like Canelo Alvarez that have made very few mistakes. Do you understand? That have become icons of the sport. Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, these types of oaks, Evander Holyfield, that reached the pinnacle of their success because they quickly figured out the mistakes they were making and they corrected them very quickly and they went on to become multiple world champions. And that's what we're trying to do here with you, is we're trying to show you where your mistakes are. So if you're back in rehab for the how manyth time, right? What you've got to understand is whatever you learned in those last rehabs, you must retain that stuff. But what you've got to start doing is you've got to start practicing that stuff in your life properly. If the coach has told you move to the right and jab, then that's what you must do. Not now, the coach, what is he now? I'm going to move left and throw left hooks. And then get hit on your ass and then blame the coach. The problem is you. Because ultimately, you're the one in the ring fighting the addiction. The coach can give you the game plan. The coach can give you the way that you're supposed to play the game. Rassie Erasmus can tell the Springboks how many times what to do. If they don't do what he says, they're going to lose. But when they get on the field and they start doing their own thing, you oaks have watched games like that, even with football. I believe Man United whipped Liverpool yesterday. Is that right? I didn't watch the game. I just heard about it. Sorry, Sergeant. Still no Liverpool supporters on the horizon. Lucky counts, but lucky counts. I didn't watch the game. I can't comment. Lucky counts. I'm just happy because I support Man U. You understand? So I don't care. Lucky, not lucky, penalties, I broke his leg, I'm in. It's 2-1. That's all I know. You know? It's amazing, eh? It's like the same with this Palestine-Israel thing, eh? When the news comes out and it says Israel is genociding the Palestinians, then it's gospel truth. When the news comes out and says Hamas is killing civilians in the street and is firing rockets, which is what happened last night, then it's, no, it's, no foreigners are allowed there, it's fake news. So let's say Liverpool won 2-1. Then it would be, yes, it's the best game ever. But now Man U won 2-1. No, lucky. It's biased. We all have it. We're biased. You know? When you learn to say, no, we played a cuck game, that's why we lost. You start making progress. I'm busy losing this game against my addiction because I'm playing a cuck game. I need to adjust my strategy. All right. And this is the thing. Whatever's going on here, you have to adapt this thing into your own life. I was just finishing my story. When I finished my time, I hadn't decided I'd finished my time. My wife came and visited me on a weekend and she said, right, we're going into the new year. Your birthday's coming up in March. So I'm going to speak to Gad. I want you home before your birthday because all the oaks that are paying for your rehab, which was the dirt bike guys, all the guys I ride dirt bikes with, who paid for my rehab, the guy that had all the money just the other day, other oaks had to sponsor his rehab. Think about that, right? Okay? You must know how much money I spent, bro, on that little relapse, that little oopsie. Settled a multi-million rand business, bro, and everything in the bank in a space of 6 to 8 weeks, but think about it. Look, I must say, I did enjoy it. I just didn't enjoy the results. Because the results, I'm still trying to patch up now. You know, and that's part of your recovery, is making amends, right? Making amends, but. And making amends is not on your terms, brother. It's on those of the people who need the amends to be made to them. You've got to start listening to those people. So my missus tuned me. You can come home before your birthday. The Oaks are holding a riding event at Calvin Grove in the Drakensberg for your 40th birthday. Right? You can go. We're going, but you're not drinking. And when things get out of hand, as they will, it's dirt bike riders, we're going to bed. And then we're going home, and for 1 year, you're not leaving this house without me next to you. I said, what am I going to do for a living? She says, you let me worry about that. You figure out your shit. Right? I said, all right, lekker, whatever you need. Okay? I came out. I went to Calvin Grove, rode dirt bikes, was great. Went home. My bike blew up. The bank repossessed it. Same time. Okay? And then I started going to support groups to keep myself busy. I started going to Reach at Woortenlewe Church in Boksburg. And then I thought, hey, why don't I carry on with this degree I'm finishing now? I said, let me carry on with that. And I did a year of that. And at Reach, they then introduced me to Celebrate Recovery. And then what started happening is that some of the oaks that were in rehab with me all the other years found out what was going on, and then I started facilitating Celebrate Recovery at other rehabs. And then I got involved in activism with a group called the Addiction Action Campaign, and we started making cuck with SA breweries and those oaks to try and make a plan to help addicts. And then all of a sudden in July of that year, the first oak arrived at my house and said, please help me. And I started helping addicts there. And then we moved to Walkerville, and then we moved to here. And we're still here doing this. But the reality is I didn't leave that house. I didn't carry a card. I didn't carry cash. I was only allowed like 4 numbers on my phone. I didn't have a phone that had WhatsApp. I wasn't allowed really on social media unless my missus was at home. So when my missus got home, I could go onto Facebook, what, to make sure that I don't hook up with dodgy oaks from the past. And it's amazing how those people find you, or how you find them. You with me? But these are rules that I've stuck to through my life. And so I've progressed where I can now handle being on Facebook. I can handle being fluked on social media. I can handle, because I've become more and more emotionally mature over the years. But it's a process. You got it. And I still, if my wife, like all the cards are on the ministry's name. So every transaction I make, no matter where I go, JP will tell you he's with me a lot. Achiro with me a lot. If I do a transaction, that transaction beeps immediately on my wife's phone. 16 years later, I don't have a bank account. I don't have access to money without other people knowing exactly where that money came from and where it went. Why? Because, you're treating me like a kid. No. I've chosen to do that, to protect myself and protect my family and protect this ministry from what? From me. Because when the drugs come into Dave, so does the devil. And the devil, what does the Bible say? Comes to do what? Steal, kill, and destroy. Who? You and everyone around you. So my advice to you, if you're sitting here today and you can't understand why you're back here or how long you need to stay, you should not be making the answers or giving the answers to those questions. Ask those that are around you and they'll quickly tell you why you're back here and how long they need you to stay. Because you might feel like you're ready to go yesterday, last week. And you might even be. You might even be, bro. But are they ready for you? That's the big question. And if you're truly in recovery, that's the question you'll be asking. What do they need to recover from me? Amen. Amen. It's the message for today.